Chapter 13. The Prince's Puppet. News of my success as a runner, said the old man, began to spread to the villages that surrounded my own, and then to the towns that looked down their noses at the villages, and then to the cities that sneered contemptuously at the towns. One afternoon, when I arrived back at the toy shop from school, I found my father sitting at the counter, painting the carriage windows of a locomotive he'd been carving over the previous few days. "Ah," he said, looking up and breaking into a smile as he saw me running through the door. "There you are at last. I was beginning to worry about you." "Sorry, Papa," I said, checking my watch. "It took me longer than usual to run home today, almost 3 minutes." "Well, the school is 4 miles away," said Papa, "so really you shouldn't feel too bad about it." "But I usually do it in just over 2, I told him, stretching my legs behind me and running on the spot so fast that the floor let out a great cry and begged me to stop. "I'll have to train harder." "You train hard enough as it is," said Papa, reaching across the counter and picking up a large cream-coloured envelope and handing it across to me. "Now, here's a surprise," he added. "A letter came for you this morning." I stepped forward and took the envelope from him. I'd never received a piece of mail in my entire life, so this was a terrific treat. "Who would be writing to me?" I asked, looking up at my father in wonder. "Open it and find out." I stared at the envelope for a moment, weighing it carefully in my hands, before running my finger carefully beneath the seal and taking out the single page that was contained within. I read it once to myself and then once aloud. "Dear Sir," it said, "Their most gracious Majesties, the King and Queen, instruct you to attend them on Monday, the 13th of October, in order to display for them the great gifts of running for which you have become famous throughout the land. Please arrive at the palace promptly at 10 a.m. on the morning of the 13th and ask for me at reception. Yours sincerely, Sir Carstairs, equi to their Majesties." "The King and Queen writing to me," I said, looking up at my father in astonishment. "I can't believe they even know who I am." "I'll have to accept their invitation, of course." "But you have school," said Papa. "You can't miss out on your education just for a bit of running." "Oh, I could go just for a day or 2, I said. "They wouldn't even know I was gone." "And what about me?" said Papa quietly, his voice filled with sadness. "You will come back to me, won't you?" "Why, of course I will," I declared. "I won't leave you all alone." "You promise?" said Papa. Yes, yes, I said, smiling at him, scarcely even thinking about whether I meant it or not. And so, on the evening of the 12th of October, I ran the 100 miles or so to the harbour and jumped aboard a boat that was headed in the general direction of the palace, and I was ready in the courtyard in my running clothes first thing the following morning, when King and Queen came out to take their daily constitutionals. Behind them loped a young man, a few years older than me, with bright blonde hair and a golden crown. His neck stretched right back as he stared up into the sky. "Are you the boy they say is the tremendous runner?" the Queen asked me, holding to her eyes a pair of spectacles that she kept on a chain around her neck, and looking me up and down as if she wasn't entirely sure she approved of me. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, nodding quickly. "I can run faster than anyone else my age." "I'm the king," announced the king. "This is our son, the prince. He will be king one day, of course, but not until I'm dead. He hopes that day will never come. Don't you, my boy?" "What's that, father?" said the prince, taking his eyes off the sky for a moment and looking at the king. "I said you hope that day will never come," he repeated, raising his voice. "What day, father?" asked the prince, entirely innocent of what was going on. "Oh, for pity's—" "Our son lacks concentration," said the Queen, then interrupting her husband as she looked across at me. he is a great disappointment to us at present, which is why the king is being kept alive by extraordinary means. The prince is simply not ready to be king." "It's true," said the boy, shrugging his shoulders as he looked across at me. "I'm not." "Well, I'm not sure what I can do about it," I said, confused. "I'm a runner. Perhaps you have me mixed up with someone else." "The Queen never makes a mistake," snapped the king. "I made one once." She snapped right back, staring across at him before returning her gaze to me. "I know exactly who you are, boy," she said, controlling her temper. "You are the fastest runner in all the land. My question to you is this: are you strong?" "Strong, ma'am?" I asked. "That's right. Do you think you could run with the weight of, oh, I don't know, shall we say, a mouse on your back?" I laughed, but stopped quickly as her expression turned to fury. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Yes, I could most certainly." "What about a cat?" "Without any difficulty." "A dog?" "Cocker spaniels, no problem. Great Danes, not so sure. They might slow me down." The Queen seemed dissatisfied with my answer, breathing heavily through her nose in a manner that reminded me of a dragon. "What if you had a boy on your back?" she asked after a moment. "A boy, ma'am?" "Must you repeat everything I say?" she asked, glaring at me. "A boy. Yes, you heard me. Could you run with a boy on your back?" I thought about it. "I wouldn't be as quick as I usually am," I told her, "but I dare say I could do it." "Good," she said. "Well, quick sticks then. Put the prince on your back and run him up to Balmoral. We've just invited one of the smartest men in Europe to set up house there and train our son in the art of kingship, and there isn't a moment to spare. The king is half dead as it is." "It's true," said the king sadly. "By rights I shouldn't even be here." "And the boy has to be ready," announced the Queen. "Off you go now. No hanging around," she said, waving her hand at me as the prince jumped on my back and we prepared to start running. "And bring me back my Highland journal," she added as we set off. "I left it there on our last holiday and I wish to add a new entry." "And my rifle?" snarled the king, his eyebrows bouncing up and down furiously. "There's a new stag in the park. Magnificent creature. Thing of extraordinary beauty. I want to shoot it." The prince was lighter than I'd imagined. Once I'd grown accustomed to his weight, I found that he didn't slow me down too much. I still managed to arrive in Scotland by late evening, and when we got there, to my surprise, the prince didn't want to go inside at all, but insisted on lying on the grass, staring up at the sky. "Look up there," he said. "That's the Great Bear." "Where?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. "There, the Big Dipper points north. Can you see it?" "Ah, yes," I said, delighted, for I'd never noticed it before. "Of course. And that's Vesuvius," continued the prince, pointing out another set of stars. "And over there is Cassiopeia, the Seated Queen." "You're interested in stars, then?" I asked. "Very," admitted the prince. "I'd like to be an astronomer, if I'm honest, but my parents won't let me. They say I have to be king." He pulled a face, as if they had told him he had to go to bed early because they had a long journey ahead of them in the morning. "Couldn't you just say no?" I asked. "Impossible," he sighed. "If I don't become king, then the crown passes to my younger brother." "What's wrong with that?" I asked. "He's an idiot," said the prince. "It would never work out. And after him, it goes to another branch of the family who we don't talk to. We'd be finished, the lot of us. My mother would never allow it." "So they've sent you here," I said, "to school in a way." "In a way," he said. "I got sent to school too," I told him. I didn't like it very much. But then it got better when I realised I was good at something. "Anyway, I'd better go inside," I said, "and fetch your mother's Highland journal and your father's rifle." An elderly gentleman was waiting for me in the palace and looked at me with a mixture of irritation and fear, as if I had been sent to burgle the place. "And who might you be?" he asked me, his voice echoing along the corridors. I told him my name and that I was there for, and he seemed to accept this as reasonable enough. "I am Romanus Plectorium, late of Rotterdam," he said. "Is the prince with you then?" he added, not sounding particularly enthusiastic. He's outside, I told him, on the grass. You don't seem too happy to be here, if you don't mind me saying so. I'm not, he said. I've been summoned against my will to this awful place to tutor the boy. I'd just finished building a castle in Rotterdam with a glass roof so that I wouldn't have to spend any money on electricity. I would have saved a fortune. In my country, I've been known as one of the foremost misers of our time. It's a great honour. What about when it gets dark? I asked. How would you be able to see anything then? Candles, my boy, candles. Took me 6 years to finish the castle, and the day I moved in was when I got the letter from the king and queen. Now the castle with the glass roof is left empty, and who knows what will happen to it? And I'm stuck here. Here, he roared, staring around in self-pity. Anyway, follow me. I'll show you where the queen's study is. He led me along a series of dark, wood-panelled corridors. I stepped into an enormous office and took the book off the desk. Only when I looked up did I notice the number of stags' heads that lined the walls. Each one was more magnificent than the last. A picture of a stag's head stuffed and mounted to a wall. And they were nailed to wooden plaques with a date carved under each one, the date the king had shot them. I walked over and looked the animals in the eyes and was sure I could see the pain and suffering they'd felt as they'd collapsed, innocent to the ground. I frowned and shook my head, noticing the enormous rifle that stood in the corner, the very thing that had caused so much unnecessary death. Here's your journal, ma'am, I said to the Queen the following evening as I handed it across to her. They were right in what they said about you, she replied. That was very quick indeed. And our son, the prince, how is he? Was his tutor pleased to receive him? Ah, that, I said, wishing I had had a little longer to prepare my story. One of the disadvantages of being a fast runner was it didn't leave me a lot of time to think. Yes, they seemed to get along very well, only they decided that Scotland wasn't the right place for him to be educated after all. Not the right place? Roared the king. The Scots are the second most intelligent people in the world, after the Irish. Yes, well, that is maybe, I said, but it's terribly cold, and Mr. Plectorium said he wouldn't last the winter, which would leave the prince in an even worse position than he is now. They've gone back to Rotterdam to continue the prince's education there. He said he'd write once they got there. The Queen grumbled a little at this news, but said nothing. And my rifle? Snapped the king, dribbling a little into his beard as the taste of gunpowder and venison reached his lips. You didn't forget my rifle, did you? Couldn't find it, sir, I said with a shrug. Sorry. A low growl sounded from the king's throat, and he looked as if he was about to attack me. I could go back if you really wanted me to, I said nervously, knowing that even if I did, I still wouldn't bring the rifle back with me. Gracious no, boy, said the Queen, shaking her head and losing her wimple in the process. You've done enough. Anyway, we can't stand around here all day. The king has medication to take and the tourists will be at the gates soon. We have to start tearing up bits of bread to feed them with, or they start to grow restless. How about you run around the palace once and I'll time you, just for fun. She removed the pocket watch from under her coat and held a finger above a large round button at the top. There's a rather lovely lavender bush at the back of the palace. You can't miss it. Bring me back a flower from it so I know you've gone all the way round. What are these, ma'am? I asked, holding out my hand and offering her a perfect purple sprig of lavender. Astonishing, said the Queen, shaking her head. What can I tell you? I said, smiling at her. I'm pretty quick. A couple of years later, I happened to be in Rotterdam for the Rotterdam Centennial Races and went to visit the prince. It turned out to have been a very good setup. He'd learned a lot at the hands of his tutor, but had done it on the glass roof of the castle, staring at the skies throughout. Really, everyone was happy, even Papa when I arrived home. You're a day late, he said, smiling at me, but looking relieved nonetheless. But only a day, I said. You came back, he said, embracing me. That's all that matters. You kept your promise.